30 seconds.
Hard work, steely resolve, and sure grittiness.
It starts with an attitude. We need swagger, okay? Regardless of what happens out there. Doesn't matter. Keep your swagger.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 5-Hole Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're coming to you live. I'm coming to you live from San Francisco. Maddie joins me today. I'm thinking Toronto, more than likely, right?
We got the East Coast covered.
There you go.
You trying to dox me, PJ?
Well, Toronto's got to be a big city, right? Like it's
We're
gonna be
close.
hard for somebody to find
We're
you.
GTA adjacent. Let's put it that way.
There you go. Today we got a bit of a special episode. So we're still going to hit the Week 16 preview, give the teams and streams worth targeting going into this week. So you're prepped for this week, but we also want to prep you for the rest of the year, especially if you're in a playoff position. We want to be talking about some playoff prep. I mean, trade deadline's barely a month away, and I think there's some pretty good targets out there. There's definitely some teams worth talking about, and we're just going to lightly brush on it today. This is going to be a theme that we'll just continue to bring up in weeks to come. But if you guys want, we're on YouTube. You guys can join us in the chat. Throw us a sub over there. We are on Twitter at FHFH, and we got the Fantasy Hockey Discord for you guys. Plenty of places to get in contact with us, to consume whatever it may be that you want to consume, mostly content, hopefully content. But let's get into it, man. So we're going to skip the injuries. We're going to skip the storylines because we got a lot to go over. I think the first thing we want to talk about are some ADP surprises. So we're like in and around the halfway point, Maddie, and there's some very definitive guys who have either broken out or busted. One of the guys I want to talk about is JT Miller, and there's a lot of buzz around him, whether it be trade or shit ton of rumors going around, like very Pasta Marchand type rumors with him and Petey.
It just felt like things went from warm to really hot with Miller this week. I mean,
so quickly.
The ice time dipped, and we've seen the video of him on the end of the bench, and it doesn't look good. There's a pretty stark difference between what the team's doing when he's there and on the ice versus when he's not. And I don't know, like, we can't read anything else into that other than just what we see, because we're not privy to a lot of the information inside the room and inside the org. But from what I see on that outside, it doesn't look good for JT. I mean, he's got so many great things about him in his game, but I mean, the things that seem to be causing him problems here are the things that caused him problems in New York and have caused him problems other places. So I don't know, but it's not good for Vancouver overall. I mean, your two best players are apparently can't, be on the ice at the same time together or in the room together.
Yeah. And, he's a leader on the team. He wears a letter. So he's a big part of the team. So if they're going to be trading him, I guess they're going to be trading low. But one of the partners that have come out is New Jersey, and Simone Nemec is somebody whose name has been popping around. And
yeah, that was interesting today. Or sorry, that was maybe Thursday or Friday that came out where, the quote with the agent that I'll have to look into this.
So my Spotify is connected. This is completely random, but my Spotify is connected to my iPad at home. I guess my daughter just decided to listen to Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. So that just blared and scared the piss out of me.
Epic timing.
Yeah, epic timing. All right, so let me get back on track here. I just want to talk first. I'm curious, like guys in the chat, or whether you're listening on Twitter a day late or whatever, who have been like the biggest disappointments for you guys? Matty Tkachuk is a name that's popping up inside the Discord. He's been good, but he's a first round pick and he's not really providing that kind of value. Pasternak had a rough first half and still isn't really hitting the mark that people want him to. JT Miller, obviously we've talked about him. He was a second round pick, absolute bust going into it. The first round picks, most places, second round pick, right on that 12 cusp. Pettersson, same team, 22.6 ADP, not doing it. J-Rob, it took him a couple months, right around American Thanksgiving. He finally started
going a bit now, right?
He's about point per game since then. Yeah, he's moving. And all right, Kirill Kaprizov. Now I know we don't. It's a hard one to traverse because, if a goalie gets injured all year, then we're like, oh fuck, what a bust. But this is a skater who was an absolute league winner while he's playing and will be, as soon as he comes back, but he's missed a ton of games. ADP just outside the first round at 13.9. We're going to have to be using points pace for him for this year. We're going to have to be using fantasy points per game when we're talking about where he lands in terms of value. But that's a lot of weeks where your first round pick turned into a streamer replacement. So that's not good.
And that GM too, right? Like, what do you do with him depending on where you are in the standings? If you're
right.
comfortably in and you can stash him, great, but maybe you aren't. Like, I just think every time we talk about ADP, I instinctively think 12-team draft. Where did they draft this guy? And like, who did you maybe take next? Right. So somebody with a Kaprizov, if you're taking him like 13th, like late first, early second, you may have grabbed someone like a Yossi on the turn.
She's doing it again, man.
Come on.
Like, I'm not lying here.
I gotta
hold on. I gotta disconnect from fucking Spotify here.
But if that's the case, you might have a GM there that, really is a little bit antsy. And, not to bury the lead here, but the schedule for Minnesota in the playoffs is about the best. Certainly from a games and off night perspective, is the best weeks 22 through 24. So, right. I mean, he's the player on Minnesota, and I don't know if you're going to be able to pry him away from the GM that has him. But if it's one of those scenarios we just talked about, maybe they're not going to have much of a choice. But
if it's a league with no IR plus or IR
right.
or whatever, like, that's an easy conversation to start. And I think you really got to move in there. There's going to be some opportunity with, it's been a year-long experiment, but we don't know who is officially running that top power play. It's been Spurgeon. It's been this guy, Declan Chisholm, and now like Brock Faber is skating again. So there's a little bit of opportunity there for found money if it's on the waiver wire. Like, you can hopefully get in on the ground floor of that. But, tying it back to ADP, like, D-men have been so strange this year. Like, yes, Zach Werenski is maybe the best draft pick of this year. But let's talk Dahlin, Fox, Yossi, Hedman, Dobson, Heiskanen, McAvoy.
Yeah, take your pick.
Out of the top 12 drafted D, like, the only ones that are returning positive value are Makar. And in the league that I use this to reference, he was drafted at a 9 ADP and he's ranked 9th. So he's not even like, he's right where he was supposed to be. Quinn Hughes, excellent year, having a fantastic year. Dougie Hamilton kind of just making it work. Not blowing down doors, but in the league that I'm looking at, he's blocking a lot, and blocks are juiced in that one. So he's got a little bit of positive value there. Heiskanen 4x'd his ADP to value.
Yeah, that's ugly.
If he was 50th ADP, he's 200 ranked right now, and it's nuts. The same thing can be said for Dahlin. Like, Yossi's having a bad year. Bouchard for the first half of the year, I think it was right around December that they finally turned it on. Edmonton as a whole. Hyman is going to be somebody that we talk about too. Some of these top goalies are actually holding their value, like Connor Hellebuck. If he's not ranked inside the top 10 of your league, you really need to
for real
reconsider your goalie scoring. Jake Ottinger's having a year, Andrei Vasilevsky, but then you also look at the flip side where guys like Georgiev, who we spent all offseason telling you not to, but he was drafted at like 60 or something, and he wound up on the Sharks, and he's not doing good there. Surprise, surprise. Guys like Saros, Swayman, Skinner, they've all been pretty disappointing. Hellebuck is ranked 1 overall in our 5-hole leagues. Otter's 22, Vasilevsky's 27, Shesterkin even is 60, and I know some folks are going to be having some problems with him. 9 out of the 10 goalies sorted by ADP are inside the top 100. Only Georgiev has been cheeks. Skaters are doing pretty good. I mean, Matthews' value is taking a bit of a hit because he's missed so much time. Kaprizov, the same deal. There are guys who are returning that kind of value, but early this season, it was really worrisome. I remember like J-Rob, Pettersson, Hyman. It was just a laundry list of like, when the fuck is this guy going to get going? And it was really
months, right? Like, it wasn't just a couple weeks they went cold. It was like 6 weeks, 7 weeks where they really weren't delivering anywhere close to value in terms of where you picked them. And so for a lot of those GMs, that meant, probably slower starts. And so now it's, how do I sort of make up some of that ground? Some of that's happening with the players you're talking about. J-Rob's been, Dallas' best forward for the better part of the last month. Matty Tkachuk, I guess February is coming around soon, so we might see February Tkachuk and David Pasternak's had a fantastic last 3 games. So he seems to be doing his thing again too. Multi-point games all around. But on the whole here, yeah, like you certainly didn't get a consistent version of where their ADP was. If these players keep doing what they're doing down the stretch, they're probably going to finish about where you drafted them, but it certainly wasn't linear.
Yeah, when you're looking at the whole picture, like it doesn't really show you how you struggled week to week with these guys. And I don't know if it's just being inside the season, and I feel like maybe this is a conversation that we have every season, but is this like one of the weirder years in recent memory? Like New York crashed. The Nashville Predators made all those moves in the offseason that everybody was like, okay, this is going to be a wagon. And look at them. Capitals are some of the top of the league, and Ovi is like 45 years old, scoring the best goal per game rate of his career since his rookie season. Columbus is in a playoff spot. Montreal's flirting with playoff spots, depending on what day of the week it is. There are tons of value to be had, both in Montreal and Columbus. Like, it's just a really strange year, and it's hard to trend out. And it just kind of like encapsulates what is hockey. Hockey is voodoo.
Anything but scripted, right? I do find that interesting. You know, the 2 little packs you just shared previously, the variance in goalie ADP in terms to where they are right now versus the variance in those top 10 defensemen and where they sit on ADP, because we spend a lot of time and energy talking about goalie variability and how that can affect how you draft, where we're seeing it in real time right now, where maybe we should be having that same conversation about defensemen, and maybe with a little more vigor than we did.
I think, the second that defensemen and skaters start to give you negative points, then the drums are probably going to sound a lot louder. And that's, I think, why goalies get the pitchforks pointed straight at them. But yeah, it's a really strange week. I want to get you on the mic here to talk about your first guy. No surprise.
You've got a few skaters here.
I do.
But we can dig into a few defensemen first, right? You kind of teed this up for me a little bit earlier with the fact that there has been a lot of variance at that position. And we're going to talk about Zach Werenski first as being an obvious ADP beat, but more just what do we do with this guy from this point moving forward? And we're going to have the same conversation about another defenseman on the flip side of that coin in Roman Josi. And what do we do with him? And so Zach Werenski, I mean, if you drafted him and held him all the way through now, he's been fantastic for you. Yahoo ADP across the board was 115. So that kind of puts him in the 9th, maybe around the 10th round in terms of draft. He was filling out your bench in terms of defensemen. He's currently ranked 7 in my Banger Cats League. He's ranked 1st over the last 30 days, which is just remarkable. Range of outcomes for him over the last 4 years, he's kind of been a 47 to 67 point player. This year, that's exploded to 93 points in terms of a pace right now. And the question is, like, how is he doing it? And is it sustainable? And from where we sit right now, like, he's doing a few things that expand his base of overall production significantly. And the first one is his shot volume. So his shot volume was traditionally high 2s and went above 3 in terms of shots per game, which is still very high for a defenseman. But this year he's up over 4 shots a game, which is like a full shot and change above his career average. And on top of that, his shooting percentage is up. But it's not up significantly. I think career he's around 6.5, 7. This year he's at 8.5%. But he shot 10.7% in 2019, and he put 20 in the net. So this is not anywhere close to uncharted territory for him.
He's 5 goals away from that. So
that's right. I mean, he's at 15 already. He's sustained his production through the team's injuries. I would say he's the definition of like the guy versus a guy on a team. Everything runs through him, especially if you watch those games. You see that Columbus power play too has been clipping. Like last 10 games, they're second in the league, 43%. They're third in goals for, just under 4 a game. Shooting percentage is a little high, so that could come in a little bit. For redraft formats, which is kind of what we speak to for the most part on this show, treat him like Cale Makar. From a Norris voting perspective, he's in that top 3 and deservedly so. Treat him like Hughes, treat him like Makar. He's untouchable. There's 37 games left in the season. What on earth are you going to move him for that if he keeps doing what he's been doing, which he's shown 0 signs of stopping? what would you get coming back that would make you want to move a player like that when next year doesn't matter to you? So I'd say untouchable unless we're talking like a legit like top 5 forward is involved. Like if you get people sniffing, like give him the Eddie Murphy from Raw, like tell Bill to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. Like you are not moving Zach Werenski in a redraft league unless it's something miraculous coming back, especially with how rare scoring defensemen are.
Oh yeah. He's putting it up like a forward, man. And you said last 30 days ranked 7. Is that just on the year? And that's not
7 on the year. Rank 1 the last 30 days. Overall.
Yeah.
Overall. Now, if you'd spent, a second round draft pick somewhere in that mix on Roman Josi, his ADP was around 20, give or take. He's currently 138 in that same league. So he's been outside the top 100 all year. He's kind of been sniffing it the last couple weeks. And things have been turning around a little bit. This is not an all bad news story about Roman Josi or the Nashville Predators really over the last few weeks. But like the range of outcomes for Roman Josi over the last 5 years, it equates to a very high volatility player. He's kind of like the bizarro Adam Fox. Like his last 3 years, you could just pencil it in. Actually, you could pen it in like 74 points, 72 points, 73 points, 60 apples, plus or minus a couple. That's Adam Fox. That is not the case with Roman Josi. And it's oddly enough seems to stack up with even years and odd years. You just said hockey's voodoo, so who knows what that's all about. But like it's a stark noticeable difference. In 2020 and 2022, he had, by his standards, pedestrian years, right? 56 points, 72-point paces. Shooting percentage was kind of average. The Nashville PP overall was not fantastic. But cue the odd years, 21 and 23, like this guy's a stud. 96-point pace, 85-point pace. The shot volume's up. The shooting percentage is up. He averages like 35 power play points. So the question is like, what's happening this year with Roman Josi? And there's a couple things that really do stand out for him. First of all, his secondary assist percentage is an absolute nightmare. It's like 22% this year versus even his career is like 45%, closer to 50. So like that's a lot of points currently not on the board for him. His power play IPP is about 10% down. His 5-on-5 shooting percentage is down. Some of these are luck metrics that over the course of the season with a player that gets the minutes he does and the deployment he does are going to normalize. And they have started to do that already. He is getting the highest offensive zone start percentage of his career, close to 70%, which is fantastic in terms of his offensive upside. That Nashville power play over the last 10 games is top 10 in the league, like 26%. And he's been consistent, right? 6 points over his last 6. You're getting the things he normally brings from a peripheral perspective. He doesn't hit anybody, but you get lots of blocks and lots of shots. So like I'd be betting on talent here. I'd be betting on those luck metrics, reverting a little bit back to their historical means, and maybe a trade target going into second half, depending on who that GM is.
I think especially in keeper leagues where, I don't know what's up with the Nashville Predators. Maybe it's too many cooks in the kitchen. You're looking at Stamkos, Forsberg, Marchessault, Ryan O'Reilly to an extent, maybe not Gustav Nyquist, but that's a lot of triggers. And there's nobody really to load the gun at this point. So it's just a bunch of guys shooting blanks at this point. And everything that Barry Trotz did last offseason on paper looked like he was building an absolute powerhouse, even down to like Brady Shea and just the defensive moves that he was making. And then Justus Annunen later on in the year, like you think that, he's doing all the right things. It just, once you put it in there, it didn't work. And Roman Josi is somebody who, for years and years, I've said the offense bottlenecks through him. So if the offense dries up over an entire season, nobody's going to feel that heavier than Roman Josi. And I feel like that's a big part of what we're feeling this year. So keeper league, like I feel like, once they, hopefully, and I'm saying once they shake off the dust or whatever it is, like they're going to, because I do think they are. So next year might be better. Again, still 35 games, still half a season to right the ship. And like you said, 6 points in his last 6. I'm a Roman Josi owner, and I've got my fingers crossed about as tightly as anybody else. So I'm really, really hoping here.
Could there be anything slid your way that would make you think about moving him at this point?
Zach Werenski, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sure like something could be fashioned up, but it's a small roster, so it's not exactly like a 2-for-1 that's really going to make
Right.
things work for me. I'm already kind of scrambling like, oh fuck, who is my streamer right now? Like, do I have I'm dropping important people just to get people.
It's a good
in,
problem
so
to have.
it's a good problem to have, but it would have to be a 1-for-1 and probably just as similar of a maybe a buy low or something like that. I've got JT Miller in my negative, like, bust category for the first half. And to be honest with you, I think if a Roman Yossi JT Miller trade was put on my desk, I think I would stick with Roman Yossi here. But who knows what happens if JT Miller winds up.
That's the thing.
Jersey, just trade Timo Meyer to Vancouver, please. Like,
jeez, I mean, poor team, allergic to power play 1 again. Like,
allergic to Sheldon Keefe and fucking Lindy Ruff.
Like Nason didn't play for a couple games, and again, potential opportunity for Timo. Yeah, Mercer goes up, does nothing. Nason's back today. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue because their PP's been good, but it sucks he doesn't really get like really any opportunity. He gets out there for like 15, 20 seconds. At the end.
All right, my good draft pick, my positive value here is Mark Scheifele. And it's funny, me and Brave Traveler in the Discord, we all off season when we were doing those mocks, it was him or it was me. It was nobody else taking Mark Scheifele in the 10th round, and like that's what happened. And the same thing happened in the actual draft. I think he went a little bit earlier, but 22nd in even strength points and on the power play. So this guy inside the top 25 in scoring. What I noticed about Winnipeg, number one, they're a wagon this year. Everybody sees what's happening there. Their PDO is going to be off the charts. Most of that is going to be Connor Hellebuck, who is just otherworldly this year. He's piling shutout after shutout. So PDO is on ice shooting percentage plus on ice save percentage. So half of that scale is going to be Connor Hellebuck, and then the other half is the entire rest of the team. So when you're looking at PDO, just keep that in mind. But the on ice goals for is way higher for Mark Scheifele right now than it's ever been. So he's just, when he's on the ice, more things are going in, and it's not just him, it's everybody who's on the ice with him. Winnipeg in general is scoring a ton more. The highest on ice goals for of his career. 17-18 was the next closest. He was straight point per game that year. Right now he's on pace for 94 points, and we're talking about a 14% increase in on ice goals for, and he's right around 17% of a higher point pace. So everything looks in line. Like he's still the same player he was. It's just he's playing 3% better than the amount of goals that are going in for Winnipeg. So his IPP is still in line. His shooting percent, like career high shooter. That's something that he does all the time. Highest power play goals for in the league. Winnipeg, number one power play in the league. They, over the last 5 years, this Winnipeg team is the 13th highest scoring team. So it's a very, very lethal team. Very lucrative team to have. Like, Nick Ehlers owners are all about it. Kyle Connor owners are all about it. Josh Morrissey is benefiting from this. And this
they've
team,
been consistent too, right? Which they had
nonstop. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What did they, 17 wins in a row or whatever to start the year? Right. It was nuts. So this is a team, they're a wagon. They're going to be a wagon.
And when you look at what Scheifele's done to, like, the knock on him in the past, would just he'd be very streaky. And this year he's just been consistent through that. I remember watching him. He came and played he played in the Ontario Hockey League, and he played for Barrie. He came and played near where I live, and watched him play. And it was in his final year before he got drafted.
Now you're doxing yourself.
No, I'm not telling you where I am. But he he scored like 4 goals that night and just looked like he was dropped down from a much higher league on the ice with these kids playing. And it was just kind of cool to see. And then he's just kind of been good. He's been one of those like better real life hockey player than fantasy player for quite a while. And it's nice to see that kind of reverting a little bit this year for him.
He's never been like really exciting. He's always kind of just been like plus or minus 5 points off of point per game. And like, that's who he is and that's who he's been. And it looked like another year of that. So that's why, a center only player wound up in the 10th round. And that to me looked like found money. That to Brave Traveler, it looked like found money, and here we are. It's found money because he's 22nd in the league in scoring, so that's fantastic. But there's so much of it that's relying on team scoring. So when you notice that like on ice goals for are up and everything else is in line, then you have to start looking at Winnipeg as a whole. Is the team performance sustainable? The PDO is 104, but again, a lot of this juiced by Hellebuck. They are shooting 12.5, 12.6 as a team, which is the third highest, but that's not like, they're not shooting 16, 17%. They're behind Washington and Tampa Bay right now. What does worry me is that their possession game, their Corsi 4 percentage is in the negative. They are defending plus 1.7%. The goals for to expected goals for, there's an 0.6 goals differential per 60. So
like to the negative, right?
Yeah. And their expected goals is lower than their actual goals. So that, it shows
they're overproducing a bit.
They're overproducing a bit. They're not getting to the dirty areas. They're not creating high danger chances, but their high danger chances does rank 14th in the league. So they have their chances, but they're bottom 5 in scoring chances, like all scoring chances, which is super strange. So it seems unlikely that if we're using just the numbers, it seems unlikely. And, Winnipeg should regress to the mean, but it should, again, I like, that's where the gut comes into it. Like, it just seems like something's in the water in Winnipeg. Like, this is just a year for them, and that's what's happening. They might just have the gas to really make it work this year. And if that kid, maybe they're just feeling it. And if they continue to feel it, then I expect we can see 85 to 90 point Scheifele rest of the way. And, right now he's on pace for 94, which is what, 6, 7, 8 points away from his career averages. He's just playing out of his mind, which is nuts. So, I had a real quick bit about Brandon Hagel in here too. So that's my piece on Scheifele, but Brandon Hagel, 11th in even strength points, and he's 147th on the power play. So anybody that's like, oh yeah, it's just his deployment that's making things happen, like, he's not doing anything on the power play. He's tied with Troy Terry, Morgan Frost, Alex Iafallo, Jake Neighbors in power play points. So everything he's doing is at even strength, 11 in even strength points. Lots of assists to go around in Tampa. Like I said, they were one of the 2 teams that is beating Winnipeg in shooting percentage, team shooting percentage. They're scoring a lot. Kucherov's there. Gensel's having a year. Point's having a year. Hagel's having a year. So everybody's just scoring. He does have some high IPP, high shooting percentage, lots of assists to go around. So that's contributing to his higher secondary assist rate. His primary point ratio isn't as high as it's been. Like, it's down from other years. So I don't know. Tampa's flush with weapons. I needed to give Hagel his flowers. He's having such a good year. And what is he? The 90 some odd point pace, and he was drafted super late. So anybody that took Hagel, great, good stuff. Like, I remember he was a late draft pick, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, for sure. And if we fast forward a little bit too, they're a little bit on the weak side when it comes to playoff schedule. So might be an opportunity to look at a player like him who was found money and maybe sell high. You're probably not doing that with Braden Point or Kucherov or Hedman, but somebody like that's a little bit less invested. I think you can start to have a conversation there.
And then we've said a bunch on JT Miller. I did find a couple nuggets when I was digging into him. So his point pace this year, relative to his 3-year average, his 3-year average point pace is 96 points. Right now, I think he's on it's 70 points. So he's 26 points removed, pace-wise, from a normal, quote unquote normal year. 20 of those 26 points are power play points. His power play point pace has been, I think, not even pace. Like, he got 40 power play points last year, 30 the year prior, 38 the year before that. Now he's on pace for 25 over a full season, and he's already missed a bunch of games. So it's not like he can get a full season. So if we're talking about 25 power play points, you need to prorate that for the 46% of Vancouver games that are left. He has 10 power play points right now. So what are we doing? We're adding 11 power play points to that, 12 power play points to that. So right there, that's 15 to 20 points of his pace that's straight up gone. And those 6 points that are left for even strength and whatever, you really don't need to look much further than his time on ice. Time on ice in the last 3 games, 14-30, 14-37, 13-22. And if we're talking about him as a a Vancouver Canuck, like straight up. Last year was 31 seconds short of 20 minutes. And every other year that he's been in Vancouver, his average time on ice across the whole season has been above 20 minutes. This season, he's played 7 games above 20 minutes. And a bunch of those games were at the beginning of the year when there was still nothing to worry about.
Too, right?
You know, they were just deploying the team the same way they always have been. So something's in the water. I'm not going to pontificate about what it may be. But, I mean, you look at the time on ice, you look at the production, you look at the hits that are down, the blocks that are down. Something's going on that's not hitting the newspapers. I'm happy it's not. That's probably
agreed.
If I'm guessing, and I hate to do that, but it's probably something in his private life. And that's not my business. I just want him to start scoring points and hitting people. But, you know, whatever he's dealing with, I hope he figures it out. Maybe in New Jersey, and then Timo Meier can go to Vancouver and play alongside Elias Pettersson and just be a fun guy. And that's my hope.
I could work with that. As a Timo Meier owner, that could work for me.
I feel like it might. Like, you got to find Rick Tocchet. Maybe he's the guy for Timo Meier. Yeah. Should we jump into the week preview, or should we jump into playoff prep? What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? Let's break the week down a bit, as we usually would. We'll skim through a few goalie stream options. We'll take a look at these schedules quickly, and then we'll finish off with a bit of that playoff prep. As we said, early days still, but yeah, let's fly into this week. So we got some optionality this week.
This is a nice week for streaming.
That's right. We and coming out of the gates too. So, you know, the last few weeks has been, you know, a 2-game Monday or a 3-game Monday, like very limited in options. We got 9 games this week coming out of the gates. So we go 9 games Monday, 8 games Tuesday, 4 games on Wednesday, Thursday, one of the heavier nights with 11 games, Friday with 4, 13 games on Saturday, our heaviest night, and then Sunday with 5. So even on our light nights, we're getting, you know, 4, 5, 6 games or more, which is nice. And I would, depending on the league and roster size, you could consider Monday an off night or a light night too, with just being over that 8-game threshold that we typically look at. But there's a lot of teams playing a lot of hockey this week, TJ, 54 games in total.
Oh, yeah. I love those weeks where the heavy nights aren't so heavy, because then you can kind of pivot from just looking at off nights where we're just looking at warm bodies to, you know, you can pivot from warm bodies to like good bodies. And that's when you're looking at guys who don't just play off nights and guys who can actually be productive, because, you know, games played in weeks that are spread out like this, where, you know, one game or one day of 13 games, you can actually, there's a little bit more flexibility. 13 teams that are playing 4 games. We're not going to list them all off. The teams with the, you know, on paper best schedules: Florida, Winnipeg with 4 games, 3 off nights, 4 games, 2 off nights. Colorado, Ottawa, Tampa, Utah, Vegas, 3 games, 2 off nights. Starting to dig a little deep, but that's Chicago, Dallas, New York Rangers, and Philadelphia. Let's talk about some weak opponents here. Who are some guys that you like?
Yeah, so not necessarily the most optimal schedule in terms of number of games and off nights, but who's playing some very weak opponents in terms of strength of schedule. So Nashville only plays 3 times this week. One of those games is on an off night, but they play San Jose, then they play San Jose again, and then they play Anaheim. So I probably want a lot of pieces of that, and even if that is on a heavier night, we got to find a way to probably fit that in, given the opponent there. Minnesota has a good looking schedule, 4 games, 1 off night. They start off against Colorado, which is no gimme, but then they go Utah, who is not scoring, Calgary, who is not scoring, Chicago, who is not scoring. Carolina, same thing, 4 games, 1 off night. They get Chicago, which is a pretty easy opponent to start the week off. Then they get Dallas, which is no joke. But then we go into Columbus and the New York Islanders to finish off the week. And the last one here that we can highlight, just because I thought this was kind of cool. I don't know how if the schedule makers did this on purpose, but Tampa Bay, yeah, they play 4 times this week, 2 off nights. And actually, they are the only team that has both their games are in pairs. So both of those are 2 back-to-backs. But they play Toronto and then Montreal, and then finish it off with Chicago and Detroit, which makes that an original 6 road trip, 4 games in the same week, which I thought was really cool. So Yeah, if you were like a Tampa Bay fan and that was like a bucket list kind of thing, that would be really cool. Those
There you go,
cities are
Alan.
all not very far together. That's right, Alan. Hop in the car and let's go.
It sounds
But
like a couple
that
games
sounds
for JoJo
fantastic.
too, right? Like Jonas
There will be.
Johansson's, yeah,
That's
he's
right.
gonna get some looks. The worst schedules. If you guys take a look at the game grid over on FHFhockey.com, you'll notice that the on paper worst schedule is not ranked by the worst schedule. And I just thought this was kind of interesting. Like the algorithm that I built into the game grid likes what 6 other teams less than New Jersey, who's only playing 2 games, 1 off night, and those teams below New Jersey that I didn't physically manually rank. It's just, the game grid it's got a mind of its own. Okay, guys. So Edmonton, who's got 3 games, 1 off night, Calgary, Montreal, Seattle, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. So take that for what it is. But, on paper, New Jersey is the team with the least amount of games. There is a certain amount of weight to off nights, but again, 3 teams below New Jersey who also have 1 off night. Really strange. For
Yeah,
what
and
it
there's
is.
18 teams that are playing on Monday that could very realistically be off night and opportunities for your schedule. So like we always say, like set it on Sunday night, see what you're working with. And maybe again at the very top of this game grid, it couldn't be easier. You just toggle off the days that are heavy nights and toggle on the days that are light nights and curate it specifically to what your team needs. And you're going to probably have a very different looking list than what we're looking at. But yeah, use the tool. It's there. It's free.
Super weird. I'm still thinking about the New Jersey being ranked like this. So it's like, having developed it, I have to dig in and find out why.
We're gonna have to shelf that, TJ, for after we're done here.
For at least
That's
a couple
right.
days. But let's get into the back-to-backs. We talked about JoJo, and I guess Spencer Knight's going to get a couple because Florida and Tampa both have 2 back-to-backs.
They do.
So if you're desperate for some goalie starts, those are 2 places that you can look. Monday, Tuesday, there's a little bit of action going on here. One of them being that set of back-to-backs for Tampa. How do you like this one? Like Dobesh has been playing a bunch. I think Merlanen finally, he might have gotten his first L today.
Yeah, that was
I went to
high
OT.
scoring game, 6-5.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
So bad showing, I'm sure of it. Anytime you give up 5 goals, unless you're giving up 60 saves as well, is probably not going to look too great in the save percentage column. So maybe Merlanen is the first to flinch here when it comes between him and Dobesh, who have been in this like run and gun kind of thing that I've made up in my brain. How do you like JoJo against Montreal? Montreal's what, 8-1-1 in the last 10 games?
They are. I mean,
heater.
they are on a very solid heater. I mean, sooner or later, I think we're going to see the same thing out of Dobish that we saw out of Lemmy Winks there in Ottawa.
Lemmy Winks. Yes.
Yes, that's right. Shout out. So, I mean, I do like the Montreal side of that. I don't really want to push any goalie out against Toronto's offense. And I know Montreal's been scoring at a higher clip and certainly more consistently than they had over the last few games. But I would take my chances with the second half of that as well, too, with Tampa. What else we got here? San Jose. Do you want any part of Boston or Nashville? Both those teams are kind of scoring. Like, I don't think so.
Even if it was Georgiev in Colorado versus Boston and Nashville, I'd probably pass on that one. Askarov's been good, but so has Boston. So has Nashville.
That's right.
In recent memory. And Tyler Toffoli was scratched today, which was something else.
I did not see that.
San Jose's got some stuff they need to figure out. Mikhail Granlund's kind of slowed down a healthy bit. But is there any other back-to-back on Monday and Tuesday? Like Carolina's got Chicago and Dallas.
Yeah, that's Chicago start. That could work, right?
If tell you what, that could be Freddie Anderson's first game.
Ooh, okay. So think? Freddie might get that. I mean, what's his ownership? It's got to be high. People just stashed him, right?
I picked him up just the other day. I think it was in the 40s. It's really not too bad. But Tokarski was sent down, so I'm thinking Freddie Anderson has got to be ready to go. I'm sure his ownership, it spiked up to 61%. So he's going to be a just go check.
Yeah, Koch led in a bunch on his last start as well too. So I mean, hasn't exactly showed out well. And Buffalo gets, Buffalo, UPL's been playing well lately, but Buffalo gets Seattle and Vancouver, and both those teams have not been scoring. Certainly not Vancouver. So I think you could target either one of those. Again, I think how severe the need is for your goaltending situation is going to determine if you want to wade into, say, the Buffalo waters versus maybe staying more towards the comfort of, they might let in 3 or 4 in the Tampa Bay game, but I'm confident they might score 4 or 5 to win if you're chasing that win. But maybe not so confident with the Buffalo offense recently.
Yeah. So is JoJo's the pick for Monday, Tuesday?
I'd
against
say,
Montreal?
I mean, that's where if I was picking any one of those goalies, I'd go JoJo.
Spencer Knight, Tuesday and Wednesday, he's going to see one of Anaheim or the Los Angeles Kings. We're going to hope that it's Anaheim because
I
that
guess
would be a
so.
really
Yeah.
pretty matchup. Yeah.
Kings aren't scoring either. So, I mean, they're not letting any in, but they're not scoring. I think over the last 2 or 3 weeks, they're like barely over 2 goals a game, but they're letting in like 1.5. So it's a lot of super exciting hockey.
Oh, God. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. Wednesday, Thursday, Boston. Corpusalo is going to see one of New Jersey and Ottawa. You would think that it would be the Ottawa game.
Side. Yeah, I mean, Ottawa's not scoring again. They're under 2 goals a game recently as well, too.
Yeah.
So maybe we take that. Today, notwithstanding, obviously, with the performance.
Columbus, I have said my piece plenty on how they do on back-to-backs. They're getting outscored 4-1. They are, I think, 0-7 at this point in back-to-backs. So chances of either Tarasov or Merzlikins getting a win or even good stats, very low.
6-4, 5-3, even if it's just charitable. I mean, it's usually 3+. Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, we got Philly, Vegas, and Utah with back-to-backs. Philly's going to see the Rangers and the Islanders. Vegas, St. Louis, and Dallas. Utah is going to see Minnesota and Winnipeg. Is there anybody here that you're digging?
I mean, as a reputable podcast, we can't really recommend any goaltender from Philly. I don't think. Yeah. Even though you could, I mean, if you need to start, like the guys will be there, so you could pick either one.
I'll tell you what, Ersson's not been bad.
No,
not been great. Yeah. But he's beaten some good teams lately, and I think in his last 10 games he's got a few shutouts too.
So and neither of those offenses, the Islanders have been heating up a little bit lately, but neither of those offenses are overly inspiring. So like if you need that start, you could target that. Vegas, I don't really want either part of St. Louis or Dallas.
And it's not like you can get them anyway, you know?
Right, yeah. And Utah, I originally thought, Minnesota's banged up right now, certainly on the back end. I know they got Faber back, but Utah's not scoring. So, I mean, it's hard to really push your chips in on a goalie stream with a team that's themselves not scoring. Because what are you really chasing? Bunch of saves. Utah's not a great possession team. That's cooled off a bit. So
it sounds like a 1-0 game or a 2-1 game that barely has any shots and any action.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's the Kings.
All right. Sorry, I just all of a sudden started losing. I'm playing Victor Nuno this week in the Fantasy Puck League, and I had a pretty healthy lead, and he's gaining on me.
Evaporated.
I hate that he has
like the T1000 running behind the car. He's just getting closer.
Friday, Saturday, we got 3 back-to-back. Saturday, Sunday. We're going to let the boys talk about this one this weekend.
Yes, sir.
Let's get into some very light playoff prep, or actually, I'm jumping the gun here. We still got to talk about some streams. We talked about plenty of teams. We got to talk about the players that you're going to be targeting. Tier 1, who do you like, Maddie? Who are your go-to teams for this week?
Yeah, I think we settled here on identifying Carolina, Nashville, and Minnesota for very different reasons. And again, notably, neither of those teams are Winnipeg and Florida, who have the most number of games and the most number of off nights. We have them slotted into tier 2 for that very reason. But we've talked about Winnipeg and Florida basically all year long, and it's really hard to get pieces of their core. So Carolina's in the same kind of boat, but Nashville and Minnesota give us some opportunities. So we liked what the opponents looked like there, and then we'll round it out tier 3 with Vegas and with Ottawa.
There you go. Let's jump into some tier 1 teams. Starting with Carolina. Jordan Staal had a bit of a run back there, but this also feels like a team that the core is pretty owned up. Is there any value anywhere else besides that core? Like Rod Brind'Amour is one of the least reliable guys to kind of like plan out your deployment streams. If you're looking for somebody who's on line 1, if you're looking for somebody who's on power play 1, Rod Brind'Amour is not the guy to go to for that kind of like stability. Jordan Staal might be the best choice, but is there anybody else worth talking about?
I mean, not really. It depends on how deep you can go down here. Burns was a great pickup. I know he's 61%, but depending on the league that you're in, he was out there. And miraculously, over the past like 5 or 6 games, he's remembered how to shoot the puck. He's got like 18 shots in his last 4 games or something.
Super vintage, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the periffs themselves aren't there. He does block decently. He doesn't hit anyone. Literally doesn't hit anyone. Hits are 0. But, he's getting apples. He's a plus player if that matters in your league. and he's bringing those periffs and the minutes alongside it. So, I mean, if he's there, you could look at that. The tough thing is, like, Carolina's been a streamer team for the past couple weeks. So, like, who's really owned here?
Yeah.
Available. Even a guy like Stahl at 90% looks like he's available. If you're in a fairly competitive league, people probably picked him up, well, the day after he got his hat trick, or,
Yeah.
you know, if you were Parisian enough, the day before he got his hat trick, but he's probably owned.
I'll take a look at day-to-day right now, but if William Carrier gets healthy by the end of next week, or the start of next week, rather, what did he say? He's looking for another opinion on his lower body injury. All right, never mind. So second opinions usually don't mean that they're coming back pretty quick, but he's banging a lot.
Yeah, and there's some defense here too. You know, maybe
Orlov,
you could go with an Orlov, a Slavin if you need to, the Sean Walker. There's some options there. They're just not overly sexy. I mean, most of Carolina's, what they do is concentrated in a very small handful of people, and those aren't the ones you're going to be picking up. So
in Nashville, Ryan O'Reilly is starting to maybe not turn it around, but at least turn it up. What do you think about Ryan O'Reilly moving into next week out of Nashville? 6 goals, 3 assists in his last 12 games, 9 points. That's looking pretty good.
That's looking pretty good. And he does satisfy another criteria, which is he's probably the only ownable piece you're going to be able to get.
That's right.
Forsberg 98, Yossi 99, Stamkos, Marchessault. Brady Shea doesn't bring anything of value really, other than, I mean, periffs you can find anywhere.
Yeah, it's a pretty steep drop off there.
Yeah, but even like the depth scoring really hasn't been there. Like some of the guys that we've been able to rely on in the past, the Nyquists, and, you know, there's, you know, the Jankowskis and LaRue's have popped really, really briefly throughout this year, but basically they've been living and dying with that top power play. So
it seems like this is just a periff stream spot.
Yeah.
Like there's not much else outside of periffs. Guys like, you know, LaRue, like you said, Luke Shen is a banger. Blankenberg's throwing a little bit and adding a little bit of offense that I wouldn't really call sustainable. So I don't know if he's not one that I buy. Yeah, I think I would move past that one as well. All right, who's next on our tier 1 teams? Minnesota. I think there's going to be a little bit to play with here. Is there anybody that you like right off the top?
Yeah, just taking a look at them over the Rossi stands out because he's been scoring and actually shooting a little bit for the first time. We've talked about actually him and Hartman both suffer from that same affliction of being on the ice a lot and not really doing much with it. But they've turned it around a little bit over the past couple of weeks. I mean, even Zach Bogosian's got on the board a couple times, but overall, I mean, Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek has been doing things for people. He's turned that around a little bit, but I mean, in terms of what you could probably get your hands on here, Yakov Trenin's pretty nice if you're in a Bangs league. Foligno, same thing. Similar to Nashville, you might get more utility looking at Nashville and Minnesota for some of the more periffs. And then if the offense, comes, it's a bit of an upside because Marco Rossi's not going to give you any of that. He's going to get you Boldy adjacent, I guess. But I would probably look at a team like this and say, I'm looking for some of those periffs, and if I happen to get anything on top of that, great.
And I think one thing that you can look to is just how banged up this team is. That's going to open up spots for guys to move up the lineup. I mean, we just lost, who was it? Johansson. So he just went out with a conky, and I mean, this team is beat up. So they're going to be throwing guys out there. They're going to be double shifting the core, like the big names and things like that. So those times on ice, the time on ice there is just going to be unreal. But
yeah,
guys
21, 22 minutes for the Boldy, Zuccarello. Like that's big forward minutes.
But I'm looking at Liam Ogren right now inside the top 6, just based on necessity at this point. So if you need a deployment stream, especially if you're in a really deep league, then that's one place to look. But other than that, yeah, man, I just don't see a ton of offense that we could have here. And the tier 2 streams like Winnipeg and Florida, I think are going to follow pretty much the same suit. Like maybe we could gamble on a Nino Niederreiter. Maybe you think, his shot volume looks pretty good right now.
It does, yeah.
Which is nice, but the time on ice is just brutal. So good shots, low time on ice. He's going to have good shots per 60. So it depends how you really sort and snuff out your stats like that. 7 points in his last 12 is pretty Nino Niederreiter-y. So I think that's about what you can hope for. I do like their schedule. So I think Nino, like if you need a week-long stream, that might be what you're looking at, especially when we compare to the options that you might have in Florida. what's it going to be? Evan Rodriguez, or it doesn't look good in comparison,
Nope. And same guys again that were options a week ago and 2 weeks ago. So a Lundell, it's nice to see he got right wing actually added on there recently, but 32%. I mean, in leagues of substance, he's probably been owned for a little while now, so he might be there. But what are you really looking at if you go much further down the roster? Bennett's hovering around 50%, so he could be available. I mean, he's been very underwhelming.
Yeah, there's a reason he's trending down in ownership. Yeah.
But outside of that, I mean, they're battling some injuries as well too. So outside of the top core there, it's going to be tough to really hang your hat on a Florida streamer that's really going to give you a ton of upside.
My guy Reinhardt got thrown out of the game today. Pissing me off.
No bueno.
Knee on knee hit, game misconduct. And now he's tossing me a 0. He's not somebody you bench. He's active on my roster, throwing me a 0.
He's on my listener league team.
I do want to mention Cole Perfetti in Winnipeg. He's deployment stream, power play 2, centering inside the middle 6.
So underwhelming.
Yeah, but deployment wise,
you got to talk.
It feels hard to miss. Like if we're talking about fucking William Carrier and Nick Blankenberg, we got to talk about Cole Perfetti. So just due diligence here. Tier 3 streams, Vegas, Ottawa. I think things open up a little bit here, but we're also losing out on some of those games and some of those off nights when we talk about these teams. But the options do get better. Pavel Dorofeyev, 30% rostered, 7 goals, 3 assists in his last 14 games, 38 shots, only behind Jack Eichel in terms of shots on goal. On the team, Tomas Hertl right behind him, but he's 68% rostered. They play together on that line too. Anybody else you like here? I feel like Dorofeyev, maybe Victor Olofsson could be a flavor of the
that
week.
Could work. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go again with Vegas, typically we're usually filling out defensemen in terms of streamers. So the McNabbs and people of the world, Hannafins, Pietrangelo, like usually you're getting that combination of peripherals and maybe a tiny bit of power play time. That's, I mean, it's tough to go a lot deeper on Vegas in terms of a stream of a player of consequence. But I mean, at 30% and dual eligible, you're going to get, like, he goes Monday, you're probably going to get his Monday night game in with dual eligibility, right?
Yep.
So all of a sudden his off nights jump up. So if you can fit him in for more than just what appears to be the off nights, then all of a sudden he jumps up in terms of your value scale for that week. So I could definitely fly with that. I just want to see from a deployment standpoint where these guys are kicking, because like you're not going to get Barbashev really anymore. I know he's been hurt and he's come back. So I mean, if that's available in your league, I'd absolutely look at that. But outside of that, yeah, Olofsson and Dorofeyev, I always lean towards the shot volume. So Dorofeyev is the guy that's going to bring you that. So
a couple of guys worth talking about, maybe not putting my name behind, is Brett Howden, Keegan Kolesar. Both these guys, I mean, Kolesar's got 3 goals, 5 assists in his last 14 games, 30 days. And Brett Howden, 4 goals, 5 assists in his last 14. But they're also adding a shit ton of periphery, especially Kolesar with the hits. But Brett Howden has been hitting and blocking and shooting enough to put him, above even Pietrangelo over the last 30 days in terms of like points per game, points, all of that. So whether or not it's sustainable, whether or not those are guys that we can rely on throughout the week, just wanted to let you know, like a floor of hits from Kolesar is still something to talk about,
That's right. He's so we got a few things there that we can work with, and it appears to be the same deal in Ottawa. They're getting a little bit more depth scoring here, albeit as a team that I think that whole boat needs, or the whole harbor needs to rise in terms of inflating some of these values. But I mean, we're getting contributions. Our boy Josh Norris had a huge day today, 2 goals, 1 on the power play, 3 shots, 3 hits, a block. So like he's got 3 goals and a couple of assists over his last 5 or 6 games. He's shooting, he's banging 35%. So like we said last week, if he's available, go get him. Shane Pinto, I believe, is up on line 1 and has been for a couple of games now for Ottawa. So if Shane Pinto's available, he's a streaky player, to say the least. What did he go, like 18 or 19 games earlier this season without scoring? And then he pots 2 and another one, and then he gets cold again. So, I mean, again, certainly prioritize Norris if you can pick him up for very obvious reasons. But they offer some bangs too, like, guys like Zub, they block a lot. but you're not really getting anything on PP1 outside of Norris. It's actually quite crazy that he's that available, considering he's been kind of stapled up there all year, right?
Yeah.
He just doesn't provide the offensive pop.
Yeah.
But if you
consistency is the thing.
That's right. But I mean, there's something for everybody here. We've talked about players like Adam Gaudette before. Claude Giroux's hanging right at, mid to high 50s. He might be available in your league potentially. But, outside of that, you're probably looking at Bangs and maybe one or two of these top 6 forwards are available.
Man, you took my guy for the week-long thing, so I'm kind of scrambling here. Nino Niederreiter, I think, would have been my pick, but you got to the document.
Take Norris. I'm probably going to beat you with Norris this week. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, my guy's done. Jason Zucker, he's all done. So
yeah, uninspiring. Oh, by the way, my Paterka stream was also fantastic. I thought I would Galaxy Brain that, sneak those 2 games in the middle of the week, and it was like donuts all around and like 3 or 4 shots. So
I like the idea of Anthony Cirelli. We talked about
yep.
But we're talking 54%. That feels like a little bit of cheating. But Tampa Bay, 4 games, 2 off nights. Both of them were back-to-backs. Cirelli could be out there. You might as well go check. I like him in terms of his stream as well. Maybe I'll go Nick Paul. Maybe it's a Nick Paul week.
Okay.
But again, I'm just kind of throwing darts here because I ran out of time, maybe because I was looking at Nino Niederreiter, and then I scrolled down in the doc and I noticed that you took him. So
both streaky players, so one of us could catch a heater.
Man, it's gonna be a week. I think
you have to type the letters though. I'm not typing Nick Paul beside your name.
You know what? How about this? I'm gonna change it. I'll go Marco Rossi. He'll be my pick for the week.
All right.
47%. It's still kind of cheating, but it is under 50, so it's technically okay, I think. So I'll go Marco Rossi for this week. All right, that's where we're going to get into. We're running a little bit long, so we want to blow through this. We want to blow through these. We took a poll in the Discord, finding out when folks like their playoff weeks were, and how they run, and then we're going to talk about the games played leaders, a couple of trade targets worth talking about. And again, this is just something that we're like lightly brushing over. This is going to be something that we focus on in a little bit in the future. I've got an episode coming out. Surprise episode coming out later on this month that I don't want to spoil just yet, but
it's going to be a good one.
That's going to be one of the themes that we're talking about. So a lot of folks, I think we mostly landed on weeks 22 through 24. Is that the one that won?
By a healthy margin. That's like the standard Yahoo settings is week 22 through 24 for playoffs.
The next most common was weeks 23 through 25, where you just run through the straight, the last games of the season, or maybe you start at the stop at the 12th. But again, the good time to say do not play up until the last game,
please,
of the season.
Yeah.
So 22 through 24 is where we're going to focus most of our might, but we also want to take a swing at some of those guys that are doing it in the other weeks and everything too. But so 21 through 23, the games played leaders here: Buffalo, the Kings, Ottawa, Toronto, Utah, Vancouver. And the overlap between the games played leaders and the off night leaders are Utah, Vancouver, Buffalo. Utah has the most with 7, Vancouver right behind them at 6, Buffalo with 5. So it looks like Utah is kind of our maybe our target team. And I don't like a ton of what they have in terms of free agency. Maybe you can look at a Logan Cooley. Maybe you could look at a Nick Schmaltz. Those are guys who have been inconsistent. And if you're holding for weeks and weeks and weeks just for the playoffs, they're not going to help you get to the playoffs unless you're like wildly over the moon, kind of already clinched. You know what I mean? So the guys we should be targeting, I think, are Keller, Gunther, Sergachev. And I don't know how much further I'm going to go than that. Like the goalie situation there, even Vejmelka, Ingram's back, playing his second game tonight. There's only one back-to-back for Utah. So
that's it.
So I don't know. And their opponents are like very, very polarizing. It's either Anaheim or Tampa, Chicago or Florida, Buffalo or Edmonton. There's not really a safe middle for them in terms of who they're playing against. So you really got to swing high when you're coming to those targets. Is there anybody I'm missing in Utah outside of those guys? Like, I feel like Cooley's a pretty solid to bottom of the roster guy, depending on your, how long your roster gets, you might be able to hold him. But
Yeah,
trade
because
targets,
we're
anything outside that?
6 weeks, right? So this would be 7 potentially that you're talking about with this player. So if you try to acquire them, sooner rather than later, are you going to hold them for 5 or 6 weeks or get a little bit antsy? But I do agree, like there's some great targets here. Certainly, hopefully Utah picks up the scoring pace in general
Perfect,
in terms
perfect
of
buy
where they
low
are.
time, right?
Absolutely. Again, you don't want to be buying these guys on heaters. So to your point, this might be some discounted value here for some of these players. You can probably pick a few of them up right off the waiver wire, but you probably don't need to do it right away. So I wouldn't necessarily look to move on something like this. I love the idea of positioning a more medium to long-term trade for a little bit higher up the roster. I think Gunther you could probably pick up, although he's like he was fairly owned. He was in the 60s, I want to say earlier, and then he got hurt,
Yeah.
so he's stashed right now. Ideally, Gunther comes back, and people have to start to make start-sit decisions with him, and I think his ownership percentage is going to drop if the production doesn't ramp up rather immediately. Sergachev, I think, and Keller, obviously, they're more linchpins on that team, so you definitely have to craft something around that. But you're valuing this. Like you're overvaluing those players because of what they mean to future you. So it's okay to overpay with current value assets that aren't necessarily going to be as valuable to you as a GM down the stretch, because maybe you're in a more comfortable position, and what the person you're trading with might actually value a little bit more than some of this future production from Keller and Sergachev that, quite frankly, might have a value of 0 if you're not in the playoffs. So
yeah, those are maybe the only 2 guys that I'd like actively make, maybe not like handicapping trades for, but either pay like slightly over, just based on what going into your specific playoffs. Gunther, yeah, maybe you can throw him into a trade, kind of like play it coy, try not to pay too much, especially now that he's on IR, now that he's hurt, now that he's in a slow streak, you might be able to buy low. But if you kind of if you give it away that you're trying to position yourself and bolster the bottom of your roster, very important to specify that Gunther is not going to be a rock solid piece of your team, but he's going to help the bottom of your roster with the off nights, with the games played, things like that. Then his value should be pretty low, and you might be able to get him pretty cheap, and hopefully you don't get rid of a streaming spot as a result. Vancouver, anybody worth going for in here? Like, this is a really weird market to kind of target right now, because Vancouver is such an enigma at this point. Like EP40, JT Miller, all underperforming. We don't know if Miller is going to be there. We don't know what the return is going to be. So if it's going to be if it's a 1-for-1, if it winds up being a Timo Meier, like you could fall into a Vancouver player who's going to bolster your playoffs. But that's also going to make whoever gets traded there a lot more expensive. Is there anybody that's on the team right now that is within a budget for you? Like Quinn Hughes is going to be out of budget, maybe a Brock Besser. Connor Garland is out there.
Uninspiring. Yeah, like some of these guys are going to be more waiver wire potential, people you might want to throw on a watch list. A player like Garland, depending again, like Besser or DeBrusque could be that type of player in your league. One thing I do like is I've been waiting for Sherwood to go on some sort of a, at least cool off a little bit so that he could potentially become available. He just hasn't really done that. He keeps bringing, the hits and the shot volume pretty consistently, and he's scoring at a somewhat regular pace. So that window hasn't quite come up yet, but maybe put a star on him in terms of a watch list. And if he does start to cool off a little bit and you start to get a bit antsy there, if he doesn't bring much else, that could be a player that I would target. But outside of that, I don't think you're getting the elite of the elite on that team. We've got flux at the top of the roster. The goaltending situation's anything but strong. Like I'm even as I'm saying this as a Vancouver fan, so like the knife is twisting as I'm saying this. But I don't have anywhere near the same amount of confidence in their offense or their goaltending as I did last year.
Kiefer Sherwood, man, if the season ended today, he would rank 6th in hits last year for a whole season. It's insane. He's 120 hits away from breaking last year's record. So very exciting stuff from him. He just needs to get that offense back. So let's wait for the JT Miller thing to kind of unfold. Buffalo is the next team worth targeting here. 11 games, 5 off nights. So you're 2- on Utah. Tuck, Thompson, Dahlin. Maybe UPL is a guy worth looking at. But outside of that, like, guys are rotating who's on a hot streak at the point. So it's kind of hard. Like Tuck Thompson, Darlene, you might be able to buy low on some of those guys if they're frustrated with those. But again,
Like the lows have been so low in Buffalo.
yeah.
Like if you're the Thompson owner, the Darlene owner, like you've been through multiple injuries, you've been through multiple incredibly long losing streaks. Like if you haven't moved that player by now, are you going to? So yeah, I'd keep an eye on them, but I think the pulse of your league is going to be important on that to see if there's an opportunity there.
So weeks 22 through 24, this is where a lot of us fall in terms of our playoffs. The games played leaders: Buffalo, Calgary, Dallas, Los Angeles Kings, Minnesota, Montreal, Nashville, Ottawa. Minnesota jumps off the page because, number one, they have the most games played, but they also have the most off nights as well. So 11 games, 7 off nights, more even than tied with Utah in the last segment that we were talking about. So
that's right. But Utah looks very up and down on this. So like it looks like they have a great streaming week and then they have a terrible one, and then they have a great streaming week and then a terrible one.
And with I mean that's a good point. So yeah, you might get to round 2, but does Utah really help you in round 2?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I mean, we're kind of just passing that off in terms of how we're going back and forth here. But like, this really does matter. If you're a team that's looking more towards the semis and the finals, then you have to discount what's happening in that first week, or vice versa. You can't overly weight what a player's going to do for you in week 24. If you're like a bubble team that's scrapping to try to get in, that's right. So, where you stand on your perch matters on here. And I got a little bit more of a pack here on that week 22 to 24, because on the surface, we've got some games played leaders that stand out. We got a number of teams that play 11 times all the way down to a few teams that only play 8 times. But off nights range from 0 all the way up to 7. And we got, like you mentioned, Minnesota with 7 off nights. Chicago's got 7 off nights. Vancouver's got 6. And a handful of other teams have 5. So it's not evenly distributed. So the first thing I wanted to kind of point out here is, like, there's a few week 1 mirages here, and Vancouver is a great example of one where over the entire course of the playoff window, they're 10-6 in terms of 10 games played, 6 off nights. But they start week 22 with 3 games, all on heavy nights, no off nights. The Islanders do the same thing. Washington does the same thing. Dallas does the same thing. So again, teams you might be targeting, but it's more the back half of the playoff schedule where those teams are going to help you. So do you need to move on them right away? Similarly, like, there's some back-to-back opportunities. Like, there's 4 teams that play 3 back-to-backs over that playoff span. So if you are looking to stream goalies, the reason we're bringing this up, we don't know who those players are, of course. We're still 6, 7, 8 weeks out. But we know for certain that Buffalo, Columbus, Vegas, and Florida have 3 back-to-back scenarios over that 3-week span. There's 10 other teams in the NHL that have 2 back-to-backs over that span. And when we look down into that very first week of the playoffs, there's 16 total back-to-backs in that week 22 matchup. And I'm talking Boston, St. Louis, Carolina, Colorado, Florida, Vegas, amongst others. There's a lot of solid options here for streaming late. The reason we're saying this is you can load up on skaters and stream goalies well into the playoffs, depending on what your schedule looks like and what your settings are in your league. But don't feel you need to load up on goaltending going in. There are lots of great options going into that. So, like, we talked a little bit about what that first week looks like. If you do make it to week 23 and week 24, like, there are a couple of notable things that stand out here as well too. There's 4 teams that play 8 times in those last 2 weeks. Minnesota, Dallas, Montreal, Ottawa, teams that you mentioned earlier. Vancouver plays 7 times, but they have 6 off nights. Chicago is a perfect 6 for 6. They only play 6 games, but all of them are on off nights. So we got a few other teams here. Minnesota, 8 games, 5 off nights. Dallas plays 8 times as well with 4 off nights. So we start to think about, like, who are some players that we could eye up on those teams, right? We mentioned a few of these guys already.
Yep.
Chicago, that's a simple conversation. Maybe somebody would consider moving Bedard. The right wing's a little bit nicer now that he has that designation, but, like, outside of that, it's not like you're going to be, looking to acquire. Might be a streamer value player for you.
Yeah, I think
closer to the time
where we're probably going to wind up is streaming these guys: Tyler Bertuzzi, Teuvo Teravainen, and there's Taylor Hall if he doesn't get traded.
Yeah.
So And that's one thing is like who's going to be left on this team, right? So like with real trade deadline coming around too, like is Seth Jones still there?
A name being talked about a lot, right?
Yeah, and those might like Connor Bedard and Seth Jones might be the only two players who I'd want to acquire, who you would need to acquire because after Seth Jones, everybody else is under 20%. So there's plenty of room to really kind of go for it. Bedard, 94%. So maybe you can make a move for him. You just got to wait for a slow streak and maybe buy low on that.
Equally, there are some pretty brutal finishes to finish off your fantasy season. I actually enjoy this a little bit more because I think this is where your potential trade bait comes. We're a month and change out, except for studs. I mean, we're talking about a team like Tampa Bay or Edmonton. We're not talking about Nikita Kucherov or Leon Draisaitl here. What we're talking about is players on these teams that you may have found money and can move early or are a little bit further down rosters. So Philadelphia and the Rangers, they only play 5 times in those last 2 weeks. The most important part of your season, it's like 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. So, I mean, there's not a lot on Philly that's heavily owned. If you could get something for a Tippett or a Michkov, if you own them already, I would start to think long and hard about moving those players as you get closer to that date. Trade deadline is when, TJ? We confirmed that February 26th.
February 26th. Yeah, for most leagues. That's your default unless you fucked around with it.
Right. So assume you're about 5 weeks out from making a trade of any kind. And so, I mean, even a Konechny who's having a really ceiling year, could you move him for something of value for you later? Somebody might want that scoring now. On the Rangers side,
Bedard, how would you feel?
I would listen. I'd pick up the bat phone. I don't know if I would slam it or not, but I mean, I could work with that. I mean, ultimately, you're just trying to capture some value in Konechny right now. That's really going to dissipate hard as you move through the playoffs
into the championships. The guy you've been leaning on all year, to get you there.
On the Rangers side, they've been so disappointing. Like, I don't think somebody's going to move Trocheck because he brings a lot of value in so many categories that he's easier to keep. But a Fox, a Panarin, they've been disappointing. They have name value still. So maybe you could pester those owners. But Tampa Bay and St. Louis, they play 6 times over those 2 weeks, 0 off nights.
Yep.
So again, Tampa, the name that jumped out to me was Cirelli, who's played really well. But
or Hagel even
both those guys actually, in terms of being more like found money and really looking to sell high. Parayko, I think, jumps off the page for that in St. Louis.
I'd put Holloway up there too.
Yeah, it would be sad to trade him with just the coverage that he's had and how well he's been doing, but I don't think he's going to sustain that production through. And even if he does, he's not going to be on the ice because the team's not playing in the most critical time of your season. You might know that, and your opponent might not. But we'll round this out with Edmonton and with the San Jose Sharks. They also play 6 times each with only 1 off night. So I would say, Edmonton power play 1, of course, and maybe Ekholm stays. Everything else can probably go. And I would really try to move. I'm going to use a word here, TJ. You tell me if it's too bold. I would try to move any San Jose Shark.
Yeah.
Before the playoffs started. Like any. If you can get value for them. Because they're not going to be on the ice for you in the playoffs when it matters. Right. And if you can extract some value from that. Great.
And think about the end of the season too. We also want to like kind of cross-reference these teams that we're talking about, like Utah, Vancouver, Buffalo, Anaheim, whatever. Like I love Frozen Tools for this. So go to Frozen Tools, put your playoffs in, and think about teams that are hungry, right? If we're talking about a Tampa, if we're talking about these big teams that are going to clinch 3 weeks before our fantasy playoffs, who are going to kind of take their foot off the gas and just they're going to win either on purpose, lose just so that they can get the matchup that they want in the first round or what have you. Like, you got to think about the teams that are hungry, that are going to be out there giving 150% every single team. So these bubble teams, these wild card teams that are really trying to jostle for position. Those are going to be hungry teams, and Minnesota might slip down into that kind of range. And San Jose was one team that I wanted to talk about. Like, are those guys still checked in that late into the season? Like that far? Like, I'm sure they've clinched like they've been eliminated, like, right? They're not.
Oh yeah, by that point.
So are they still, I mean, you know, they're professionals, they're competitive. Obviously, I'm not saying that they're going to go out and just like unplug their controllers and skate around for 60 minutes, but I'm saying, like, you know, teams that have something to play for and motivated are going to play a little bit harder. So you kind of get these bottom of the barrel teams that, number one, aren't going to be helping you in playoffs, and two, you know, might be taking their foot off the gas, thinking about the Lynx a little bit too hard. You know, 2 weeks away, they're going to be golfing and whatnot. So,
and that's obvious. I think that's obvious to see when you're, say, 2 to 3 weeks out from the end of the season, which is right in the heart of what we're talking about. It's a little bit less obvious for your league mates to see if you're 2, 3, 4 weeks out ahead of that, right?
Yeah.
And you've already moved on that player that, quite honestly, again, like, picture future you in the playoffs. TJ, what do you do when you have players on your roster that can't help you and your window of time is 1 week? You drop them for nothing. That's right. Anything of value you get for them ahead of time, if you don't need the production that they're going to do for you, is going to be a net positive for you, right?
Yes,
so just keep that in the back of your mind.
So Minnesota being the number one team for weeks 20 through 24, March 17th through April 6th, which coincidentally is my playoffs in all my leagues. Minnesota, Matt Boldy is going to be a guy that you're going to be going after. Maybe Kirill Kaprizov, especially in leagues that don't have IR. Maybe right now is the time you can make a move for him.
Maybe.
Jeek, I think there's going to be a little bit of found money there. Center only is going to be a little tough to play with, but that's why they got all those off nights. So they, you know, there's still going to be some value to be had there. You know, I really want, outside of that, like, maybe Rossi can get on a heater and he can deserve a spot on your roster for that long. But, you know, Zuccarello, some folks have been kind of disappointed in Zook. So maybe you go out and get the assist machine that will eventually come back as Kaprizov comes back. Like, think about that too, the trickle down of Kaprizov not being around. Maybe you go for a Gustafsson. You know, goalies aren't exactly, you know, like you said, they're not something you're going out and getting, because goalies are extremely volatile when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like they have one back-to-back across the entire 3 weeks.
That's going to be a lot of Gus.
That's
a lot of Gus.
Absolutely.
So a lot of Gus. But again, you know, one bad week is really going to spin it for you. And this is, they have one of the harder records against, like, their opponents. Their opponents win 60% of their games through those last few weeks. So hard road ahead for Minnesota. But, you know, if they're hungry, if they wind up slipping in the standings and they're fighting for a spot, then every single game is going to be high scoring, high event, good for our skaters, maybe bad for Gus. So we'll see. Hopefully the defense comes back pretty soon.
Buddy, like, I think we covered pretty much all the ground here that we were going to cover.
Yeah. And last week we had a question. We never heard back from him about what to do with the Four Nations playoff. And I think, you know, the break that's happening there is a perfect time to really either start conversations or make these trades happen with the break that'll eventually happen. And I like what you said about guys that got snubbed. This can probably be something we talk about leading
we're going to do a pack
into
on
those
that.
Weeks.
That's right.
Where guys that got snubbed from those teams might have a chip on their shoulder. It might be worth streaming while things are happening and while things are leading up to the Four Nations. So that's definitely a storyline worth following. And that is actually, like I said, that's going to wrap it up for us in terms of this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a bit of a different episode, so it was fun for us to kind of
I enjoyed that, man.
You guys, and we always dig it. So if you guys want to hang out with, I think we're really closing in on 3,000 members inside the Discord. You guys can hop in there. I think it's attached to our Twitter, so look for our Twitter. The link to the Discord is there. r/fantasy hockey has the link as well in their Discords, but find us on Twitter at FHF Hockey in the Discord, and here on YouTube if you guys want to hang out. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and until next week, we will catch you. And yeah, like I said, we've got some fun stuff coming up. All right,
appreciate
love you guys.
Bye. Go Bills.
Go Birds.
Nuggets.